Say the truly great players are best when the lights are the brightest. But today, we're talking about the guys who crumbled under the pressure. These are the worst players in the 2024 NBA playoffs. And, unfortunately, we're starting with a familiar suspect.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Westbrook is a player who traditionally struggles with his shot, especially in the playoffs. For his career, Westbrook is shooting 44% from the field and 30% for three. But in the postseason, his shooting averages dropped to 40% from the field and just 29% for three. Over 23 playoff series in his career, Westbrook shot below 40% in 11 different series, which might be an NBA record. But this time, in the first round against the Mavericks, Russ hit a new low. He shot only 26% from the field, 23% for three, and 61% from the free throw line, averaging an abysmal 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Russ scored a total of 38 points in the series, but took 50 shots to get them, and he had a turnover for every assist he made. Westbrook will be a Hall of Famer based on his numbers in the regular season, and rightfully so. But in the playoffs, he's probably the least efficient scorer of all time, and he was, by far, the worst shooter in the 2024 playoffs. However, Russ wasn't the only member of the Clippers who had a disappointing playoff performance. A lot of blame also has to go to Paul George, who played below the level that his salary and superstar reputation would suggest. PG-13 had a masterful performance in Game 5, scoring 33 points, hitting 7 out of 10 threes, and dishing out 8 assists in a 116-111 win. But in all the other games, George was anemic, averaging just 17 points, shooting 37% from the field and 28% from deep. With Kawhi Leonard injured, the Clippers needed a superstar performance from George, and he only came through in one game for them. When you've given yourself the nickname Playoff P based on your play in the playoffs, and then you get knocked out in the first round with such a lackluster performance,
to nosedive again in the postseason the way that he did. They both 34 years of age, him and Paul George. This is not the way for the franchise to go.
maybe it's time to get a new nickname. We still remember George's airballs in the 2020 bubble, when the fans started to call him Pandemic P. And unfortunately for him and the Clippers, these jokes resurfaced again in the 2024 playoffs. But George wasn't the only player whose old meme came back to haunt him in the 2024 playoffs. In 2019, after they got eliminated from the playoffs due to these 4 unlucky bounces, the Philadelphia 76ers decided to give Tobias Harris a max contract, while Jimmy Butler got traded to Miami. 3 years later, Jimmy and the Heat knocked out the Sixers in the second round, which gave birth to the infamous line,
"Tobias Harris over me?"
And in the 2024 playoffs, Harris once again proved that he wasn't the one who deserved a max deal. After a pretty solid regular season, where he averaged 17 points per game with 49% shooting from the field and 35% from three, Harris was MIA in the playoffs. Against a depleted Knicks team, Tobias was supposed to be the steady third option behind Embiid and Maxey, but he failed to deliver. Just 9 points per game in the series, shooting 43% from the field and 33% from deep, it's a disaster. Especially painful was the last game of the series, where Harris scored a donut. 0 points for 29 minutes on the court is unacceptable for a player who's earning $39 million.
This is a guy who has not performed at the level of what his contract says, especially in a game like tonight.
The best part of tonight ending is that we never have to see Tobias Harris again.
And Harris has likely played his last game as a 76er. However, the worst contract in the NBA right now doesn't belong to Tobias Harris. It belongs to Bradley Beal. Beal was the 6th highest paid player in the NBA this season, earning nearly $47 million, with 3 more years on his deal and $160 million left. For that kind of money, you'd expect Beal to average at least 25 points per game and a deep playoff run for the Suns. In the last regular season game, which Phoenix needed to win to avoid the play-in, Beal played great against the Timberwolves, scoring 36 points on 14 of 21 shooting, while playing excellent on-ball defense. But in the playoffs, against the same opponent, it was like somebody turned off a light switch.
I've never been swept a day in my life, so I'll be damned if that happens.
Beal and the Suns failed to win a single game, getting swept in the first round by the Wolves. Beal wasn't aggressive enough. His defense wasn't up to par. And even though he made 43% of his threes, Brad averaged just 16 points per game, including a horrible Game 4, when he finished with 9 points and 6 turnovers. It was one of the worst elimination game performances from a superstar we've ever seen. Then when you add in the fact that he's making over $40 million, yikes. Because of his size, injury history, and skills overlapping with those of Booker and Durant, trading for Beal might prove to be one of the worst trades in modern NBA history. And since he's owed more than $160 million in the next 3 years, and because he's the only player in the NBA who has a no-trade clause, Beal is essentially untradeable. Due to the more strict salary cap rules, the Suns are now stuck between a rock and a hard place, and their only hope is that Beal somehow returns to his Wizards form. And the main person to blame for the Lakers' first-round playoffs. Actually, he last played basketball in 1993 for the University of Michigan. It's Rob Pelinka, whose tenure as the Lakers general manager has been a roller coaster, with some great decisions, but also some horrible ones. After the Lakers fixed the Russell Westbrook fiasco by trading for Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, and D'Angelo Russell, they made it to the 2023 Western Conference Finals. And then they let go a big part of the team that brought them there. Lonnie Walker, who single-handedly won a pivotal Game 4 against the Warriors in 2023, was not re-signed, and he had a solid season for Brooklyn, shooting 39% for 3 in 2024. The Lakers desperately lacked shooting on their team. But even more importantly than Walker, they didn't re-sign Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder is one of the fastest players in the NBA. He plays elite on-ball defense, and he was one of the rare players who could hound Steph Curry all over the court. In the last 5 years, the Lakers had the most success when they based their game on great perimeter defense and pushing the pace in transition. And with Schroeder, they had a guy who was excellent at both. To replace Dennis, they brought in Gabe Vincent, who signed a 3-year contract at $11 million per season, while Schroeder signed a similar deal with Toronto. So, for virtually the same money, they passed on a guy who possesses 2 elite NBA skills, and they brought in a guy who has none. And that's not to bash Gabe Vincent, who had a very good finals run with the Heat in 2023, but Vincent is a guy who does a lot of things well, but nothing great. In his 4 seasons in Miami, Vincent averaged just 7 points per game, shooting below 40% from the field and 33% for 3, which is below the league average. He's a small point guard who's not a great defender, and it was completely baffling why the Lakers spent that money on him. In the Lakers' 2024 playoff series against the Nuggets, Vincent spent 69 minutes on the floor across 5 games, and he scored a total of 7 points, 3 assists, and 3 turnovers, shooting 25% from the field and 14% for 3. And despite such horrible performance from Vincent, he didn't receive a lot of blame in the mainstream media, because the bulk of the blame fell on the back of D'Angelo Russell, and rightfully so. Unlike Vincent, Russell is a great shooter, but his shooting percentages traditionally fall off in the playoffs. In the 2023 regular season, D'Angelo shot 47% from the field and 40% for 3, averaging 18 points per game. But in the playoffs, he shot only 42% from the field and 31% for 3. And because he's also a below-average defender, Darvin Ham realized Russell was virtually unplayable, and he got glued to the bench in the Western Conference Finals against the Nuggets. And then, what did the Lakers do? They paid Russell $17 million per season, while Schroeder, who ended up starting over Russell in the playoffs, walked away for free. However, in the 2024 regular season, D'Angelo had some great games for the Lakers, averaging 18 points on 46% shooting and 41% for 3. But once again, he disappeared in the playoffs, shooting an abysmal 38% from the field and 31% for 3. D'Lo averaged 14 points and 4 assists in the series.
Russell misses again,
including a horrific Game 3, when he finished with 0 points on 0 for 7 shooting. The scene where he was left out of the huddle while the rest of his teammates were in the middle of a timeout was a microcosm of his tenure with LA, because he's probably played his last game in a Lakers uniform.
It was one of those moments where you needed to walk over to him and say, get the hell out.
Granted, the Lakers struggled defensively because Jared Vanderbilt, their second best defender, was injured. But still, the majority of the blame goes to Pelinka, who equipped Coach Ham with 2 average point guards while paying them nearly $30 million, and then failed to make any moves at the trade deadline.
We've heard, like you just did, LeBron James post-game saying that he wants some things, but also this isn't his job. Help us make sense of this, because the Lakers have not made a move yet.
But there are more players who didn't play up to their standard in the playoffs and deserve to be mentioned. Michael Porter Jr. is another max contract player who played great in the first round against the Lakers, but then completely flopped in the second round against Minnesota. And PJ shot just 37% from the field and 32% for 3 against the Wolves, for an average of 10 points. And not to mention, being 6'10", he didn't provide enough rebounding and defense to battle Minnesota's front line, and is probably the main reason the Nuggets lost the series. CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram Ingram showed very little in their first-round sweep against OKC, even though Ingram has to get a pass because he just come back from a knee injury and was clearly not at 100%. And finally, we have the entire Cleveland Cavaliers supporting cast, namely Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, and Darius Garland, who all failed to provide enough scoring punch next to Donovan Mitchell, who had to carry his team the entire playoffs. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel.